We're now joined by Amanda Christovich of Front Office Sports, and there she is. Thank you very much for your time. From the beginning of the settlement, Amanda, and it's not because of any knowledge I had, but I always kept wondering, how is this going to eventually merge with Title IX? I just always felt like something would happen, not that it would ruin it, but that it would interrupt it. And yesterday, of course, there was the rescinding of the guidance of NIL compensation. How big of a deal was that yesterday? And thank you for your time today.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think it was relatively expected. This is obviously one of many changes that the Trump administration has made, and reversals from the Biden administration. So if you remember, just a few weeks ago, right before the college football playoff, the Department of Education, sort of in the 11th hour, as Trump said, released this 9-page memo saying that, like, hey, NIL deals that schools give athletes are subject to Title IX, which means that the House v. NCAA revenue sharing payments have to be equitable between men's and women's sports. And obviously that threw a big wrench into everyone's plan, because most athletic departments that have publicized their plans have said that they're planning to give 75% of that revenue sharing pot to football players. So yesterday, the guidance was quietly taken off of the Department of Education's website, and none of us really knew what, we kind of assumed what that meant, but we weren't quite sure. I checked in with the Department of Education, and they got back to me this morning and said, yeah, officially, our position is, as the Department of Education, is no longer that NIL deals offered by schools would be subject to Title IX. They had this quote saying that there was nothing about Title IX nothing about NIL deals in the Title IX statute. I mean, there's nothing about sports in the statute either, but that's neither here nor there. And I think, even though it's a big deal, it sort of means, like, okay, status quo continues. What the athletic departments were planning to do about offering that 75% to their football teams, I guess they can do, as far as the Department of Education is concerned.
Amanda, I had you on the show right after that happened, and we talked about it, and it was...
I called you from the airport.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it was one of these weird political, like, out-the-door things that seemed unnecessary, or like we knew it was going to happen, and it's already happened. It's been 4 weeks, since that happened. So what is going forward? Is there going to be a plan to make sure this is more equitable down the line? Because it seems, if you want to get more revenue for the women's sports, they have certainly made new media deals that have shot that into it, but you can't make women's basketball and softball as big as men's basketball and football tomorrow. Like, it's a process.
Right. I think, there's three things that come to mind. The first is what you were saying about, organically, this idea that athletic departments have to become savvier at, marketing the sports that for years and decades they haven't marketed. But, once they did market the women's basketball tournament, the women's Final Four got, millions of more viewers than the men's did last year. I was actually at the men's Final Four, and everybody was, like, watching the women's on TV. They got like 18 million viewers for the championship game, I believe. So it is possible. And if you can make more money for your athletic department and your team, then you can give more of it theoretically to those players, even though there is a cap. So I just wanted to point that out. There are two other legal mechanisms. Like, this might not be the end of the Title IX and NIL fight. There is a lawsuit over at Oregon about 32 women's sports athletes, and they are claiming that NIL collective payments should be subject to Title IX. So we have to watch that lawsuit. And then, the question becomes, are the objections of the House settlement, many of which are about concerns about the revenue distribution, more so the damages distribution, but also this upcoming revenue sharing era. Like, there are a lot of written objections that cited that Biden guidance, saying we're worried about, our women's sports athletes getting the short end of the stick here. So I think it depends, how much that matters to the judge. So I think like those are the different sort of factors that are still at play.
Amanda, just to clarify for those who don't understand Title IX, and it's about making sure that women had opportunities to play sports. The Title IX, and there's a lot of different parts of it, basically was scholarship for scholarship. Is that right? When it comes to women getting scholarships at whatever said university?
Yeah, so this is actually like really deep in the weeds. It's a good question. My rudimentary understanding is that so the language of Title IX is about equal opportunity and equal resources. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, dollar for dollar, you need to give the same scholarship amount to the men's and the women's, but you need to give equal opportunity. So if you have like 20 like specific athletic scholarships for one specific, area, or like, you can make, I don't know, come up with some sort of accolade, right? You have to, you can't say we're going to give 15 of them to the men and 5 of them to the women, theoretically, right? Like, so there has to be some sort of equity there. I mean, it's also based on like how many athletes are actually enrolled. Like, not every school has the same number of women's and men's sports athletes, and there are like external factors that Title IX like sort of allows, where they're like, oh, this isn't about discrimination, it's just the situation. There are external factors, right? So there's a little bit of wiggle room, but ultimately, yeah, that's the idea, is like there has to be the same availability. Even if all the women don't claim them, there has to be that same availability.
So does yesterday's rescinding of the guidance, what the Biden administration put together, does this clear it? Does this mean that there's one less hurdle when it comes to the settlement being finished, or is this just maybe a small bump in the road? What is this?
I think that it's definitely a deep breath that all the athletic directors are taking, because there's no longer a federal agency regulation about how they have to spend that House settlement money. But, that doesn't mean that the judge isn't, all those objections about gender equity and how much you're on the money distribution in the House settlement, those are all still there. Like, those people still have those objections. So it just depends if the judge thinks that's important enough or legally relevant in this case. And then beyond that, like I said, there's that court case in Oregon that has a motion to dismiss hearing set for like a couple weeks from now. So I guess if it gets dismissed, never mind. But that the ruling in that case could force, it's like the courts and an act of Congress have a higher priority of jurisdiction over like the interpretation of a law by a federal agency. This is one of the things that I guess they didn't put in that, like how a bill becomes a law thing that I have had to learn.
Yeah.
So a federal court ruling saying, hey, Title IX does apply to NIL collectives, that would create an even bigger problem. Let's just put it that way.
So now we are just timeline wise.
Yeah.
April would be the official ratification, and then it would go into like basically they put it into practice starting in June, right? When the new athletic season starts.
Pretty much. So on the day of the men's basketball national championship, so I'm really looking forward to all the media who are covering that. The Final Four. I will be one of them from San Antonio, sitting there on our computers all day before the game, like watching this hearing. So that's going to be on April 7th. And then the schools have until July 1st to put the finishing touches on how they're going to implement this plan. And so does the NCAA. And then on July 1st is like the date that revenue sharing becomes allowable, theoretically. But if it's not approved in April, then honestly, I have no idea what the timeline could be, because the parties could say, okay, we want to try to come up with a different settlement, or it's possible that they might end up going to trial, which stretches this out even more.
Amanda, we appreciate it. Thank goodness you're out there for us to be able to pick your brain.
I'm doing my best. Thank you for having me.
You're doing a great job. That's why we contact you. She's the best. Amanda Christovich with Front Office Sports. Appreciate her insight on what exactly yesterday's rescinding of that particular guideline, all that stuff that is now one less hurdle, but still work to be done.